emergency for the first time in about...
This is Jim, and
Receiving this message. We are Ken Jennings and John Roderick. We speak to you from our present, which we can only assume is your distant past, the turbulent time that was the early 21st century.
Fearing the great cataclysm that will surely befall our civilization, we began this monumental reference of strange and obscure human knowledge. These recordings represent our attempt to compile and preserve wonders and esoterica that would otherwise be lost.
So whether you're listening from an advanced civilization or have just reinvented the technology to decrypt our transmissions, this is our legacy to you.
This is our time capsule. This is the Omnibus. You have accessed entry 1087.MT1902. Certificate number 22347. The Royal Touch.
Come on! Touch me, I'm sick!
Who have you met in your life who, just from some combination of the gravitas of their position or their personal magnetism, really seem to have some kind of superhuman presence? Like, have you ever met that kind of a charismatic person? I know you want to be that person in the room.
Yeah.
Is this like admitting that there's another alpha male? If you're like, I met Bill Clinton and he was like, Mr. Roderick.
I never met Bill Clinton.
Because people say that about him.
Yeah, right.
That he just looks at you and then you're like, you and him are romping through the clouds.
I met Susanna Hoffs.
Ooh.
And, she's very small. And she travels with a very large bodyguard who's always there with her and has been for apparently decades.
You said she's very small, like I would.
I'm sure know that
I did not. Like, if you showed me 3 Susanna Hoffs of different scales and were like, point to the real Susanna Hoffs, I don't think I could do it.
But she just is, she has such a tremendous positive energy that, I would not have said during the 80s, if I had made a list of the pop stars that I had massive crushes on, I don't think that I would have put Susanna Hoffs on the list, because I think I would have said that she was a little cloying.
Wow, coming in hot with your hot Susanna Hoffs takes.
Yeah, but meeting her in person, I was just flabbergasted.
I see
what
why.
A vibe she has.
I see why all the kids in the marketplace say, "Hey, oh, hey, oh."
That's right. And
you couldn't put your finger on why.
Well,
sandalwood and her pheromones.
She's beautiful, but she's very positive. Even not just speaking, but she's just very warm and friendly. And I mean, I guess if you have a 300-pound bodyguard that follows you everywhere, you can afford to be warm and friendly. Maybe I would be warmer and friendlier if I had a bodyguard. But
is that the one thing keeping you from warmth and friendliness?
Maybe. And I had dinner with Ted Danson once, and he was also just extraordinary. Like, he seemed like he'd been carved out of a very rare South American wood that you couldn't get anymore. Like, the
trade has been restricted on Danson wood.
He seemed kind of otherworldly. Yeah.
People often say this about politicians, but really it's got to be actors and musicians. They're the ones who are most trained to do the little things with their looks and their voices and their bodies that really give off this kind of otherworldly power.
Right. If you can walk like an Egyptian, I imagine it's not something everybody can do.
You're not going to be running for Congress.
But you've met a lot of lofty people. Have you?
Not really. I was trying to think what my answers to this would be.
You've had dinner with Tom Hanks. Doesn't Tom Hanks?
He's an everyman.
He's just an everyman? He just doesn't give off a like a heavy.
It is kind of it's
Buzz?
kind of the unusual people who strike me this way. Like, for example, Alex Trebek really has had kind of this air of authority, and you're never quite sure how much of you being impressed by Ted Danson is just your cultural memory of seeing him do larger than life things. You know, if you just saw a normal guy in sales who kind of had that vibe, would you be like, wow, Gary? Or is it like, no, I saw Ted Danson be Sam Malone and he was in Body Heat. And
Well, I've met 2 different Medal of Honor winners, and they were both total goobers.
Well, this is an interesting case because they're extraordinary people, but not celebrities.
Right. And they were just like what you would expect, like kind of older goofballs who were like, ha ha ha. Well, one time I went over the ridge and took out 4 machine gun nests, but ever since then I've been building model trains in my garage. And I mean, they were like charming, lovely people, but they had won the Congressional Medal of Honor. So you would think that they would
probably more Congressional Medals of Honor than, say, Ted Danson has won.
Right. 2 more, or each one of them had won 1 more.
I'm not going to Google up the awards and nominations part of his Wikipedia, but I'm going to guess several Emmys, no Congressional Medal of Honor. He's never going to get the EGOT. With Alex, it was very much, a lot of it was the persona you saw where you had seen him be in a position of knowledge and authority for 30 odd years.
Well, I only saw
And
him
that
the
came
once in person, and he also looked like he was carved out of a wood that's no longer available.
Well, you saw him heavily made up for TV, right? It was a TV taping.
Right.
So
he was sick too, so.
Right. But no, he very much had that kind of affect in person. And I had to ask myself, how much of this is something he's really giving off and how much is just what I bring to it from having loved him on TV?
Yeah.
I talked to Christopher Guest a couple times, and he's kind of famously eccentric.
Yeah.
But also, he has that kind of the noblesse oblige and to the manner born that comes with being
royalty.
Christopher Guest, the 23rd Earl of Brunswickshire or whatever he is.
Right.
And he very much conveys that. And there is kind of just an ethereal quality to meeting someone. And that was what made me think, I wonder if this is what meeting royalty is like. Because I've never met a peer of the realm, I guess, again, except for being on this shuttle bus with Christopher Guest. I've seen the Queen wave from a car.
Oh, you have?
Yeah, did I tell this on the show? We were touring Windsor Castle once, and they had whatever flag it flies at Windsor Castle when the Queen is there.
Yeah.
Is that the Union Jack? I can't remember.
Yeah, they put it all the way up.
It switches to, it's at half mast. Oh, we're so sad that she's gone. No one's watching BBC Two in that weird pink bedroom. No, they switch to a different flag when she's in residence, and as soon as she leaves and we get there, right, and the Queen's flag is up, and we like nudge the kids, and we're like, hey, this is fun.
Hey, look at that.
And then at some point, a bunch of cars and people are circulating in this central car park courtyard thing, whatever the breezeway is where cars come and go. And enough tourists are crowding at the windows that we figure out, she's probably leaving today. And sure enough, as we're walking out, I'm like, I'm going to go look. And I bring the kids over right as she kind of trundles into the car, and she rolls down a window, and she's got corgis, and she like waves placidly as they pull out.
That was one of her top skills.
Yes, it was her number one skill, probably. I mean, thanking workers at textile mills.
Right, a big thing that she did.
Complaining when they decommissioned her yacht. I only know what Queen Elizabeth did through
The Crown
TV movies. Yeah.
I have met minor nobility.
Of what country? Brunei.
Of minor nobility.
I've met several concubines of the Sultan of Brunei.
No, I was in a town called Freckenhorst, Germany, which is very small little
and very made up.
It does sound made up. Freckenhorst. It's outside of Münster.
Nobody looked this up.
And I was there, and I heard a Oompa Oompa band, and I was sitting in my hotel, and I was like, I do not want to. I've got my shoes off. I don't want to put my shoes back on and go out and find where this Oompa music is coming from, but I can't not. I can't not go trace down what's happening. And so I put my shoes back on, and I went, and I'm walking around, and I can't figure out where it's coming from. There's a big wall in the town, And I walk around the wall, and there's a big church there. And I come to this what looked like a town hall, and there's a wall all around it. And inside there are probably 100 people, all dressed in like
Lederhosen.
pretty much, but not this isn't Bavaria. It's up in Munsterland, and so they're in this kind of Schützenfest costuming.
It looks like folk dress.
Well, hats with big feathers, and it's very militaristic, but kind of comically, like that thing that the Germans do, where it's like, is this serious or are you having fun? And then you realize it's really serious, and it's like, but your uniforms are kind of pink.
You look like you're in Prisoner of Zenda, but
anyway, so I went in and they were having a big party, and I went over to the bar and ordered, a Coke, and there were 2 teenage boys tending the bar, and they were very handsome. No one else there was handsome, but these 2 teenage boys were handsome, and they laughed, and they served me the drinks. And then somebody in a Schützenfest outfit came over and said, "This is a private party." And I was like, "Oh, sorry, I just,
Did you buy the drinks, or were you counting on the?
No, I was just like,
the complimentary bar.
Hey, hello,
Open bar. What's up?
I'm John Roderick. How do you do? And anyway, then the door on the second floor of the town hall opened, and out walked a man who looked very much like a prince, and older guy, and his beautiful wife and his young daughter, and they came and they did some sort of Queen Elizabeth wave, and all of the frickin' Horst Schützenfest people started goose stepping.
What?
In a big oompa parade around in a circle, and I was gobsmacked, as you would be. And they did this 3 or 4 times around the courtyard, and they're all drunk, so it's like drunk goose stepping. And I realized, goose stepping is just part of their culture, Ken. But then
when you and I do it, it's appropriation.
Yeah, that's right. And then somebody said, well, then the goose stepping stopped, and everybody went back drinking, and then the prince went back inside the house. And then and I stayed all night, of course.
I can't believe you weren't asked to leave.
No. Then they were like, you're one of our oldest friends. But then somebody said the 2 teenage boys who are tending bar are the 2 sons of the Earl who lives in this Schloss, which is not the town hall, but is the princely manor of the old family that rules in Freckenhorst.
And their summer job is with like a catering company?
Well, no, they're just like, oh, we're having a party, we're going to tend bar, right? And I was wondering, like, why are the bartenders 16 and 14?
Liquor laws are very different over there.
But I did have that experience of like, these boys are like beautiful, and in a way that then once I realized they were royalty, I couldn't figure out whether I loved them because...
Well, you noticed first.
I did, but then once I knew, I had that American thing of like, you guys are some kind of aristocrats?
You're only 6 deaths away from being the Earl of Vedder Hammersmorst?
Right, even though that whole system was abolished in Germany at the end of World War I.
That's what I'm kind of wondering. This is kind of an ancestral, traditional thing now?
I think throughout Europe, there are all these families that don't actually have any power or authority. I mean,
but they still have a Schloss.
There's like a king of Romania still. Some old man who's like, well, technically I'm the king of Romania, but nobody wants me, or they want me, but there's no house anymore.
Yeah. I was reading about reading background for this very entry. I was reading about Henry IX of England, who of course, spoilers, never took the throne. We're not in some Man in the High Castle world where there was a Henry IX of England, but this is just some, last Stuart pretender, living in Corsica or Ireland somewhere, like well into the 19th century, being like, yeah, I'm Henry IX, by the way.
The ninth. Because of just some twist in the War of the Daffodils, and he could have been the...
No, it's the
right, of course.
Yeah, he's
the schism.
He's the Scottish Stuart heir who, if that had gone another way, would have been Henry IX, apparently. I don't know why they're picking Tudor names, but they did. But I guess, yeah, our modern kind of fascination with the glamour and glow of celebrity is maybe the only way we can really appreciate how a medieval European would have felt about her or his king. We don't necessarily believe that God has appointed Christopher Guest or Ted Danson to appear on our televisions, and that, because Christ cannot be here, that Sam Malone is doing what Christ would do if he had retired from the Red Sox early.
Which is to have dinner with me.
Tend bar at
One
Cheers
time.
and have dinner with John once. I'm sure he thinks back on it often.
We had a very lively conversation.
But people really had a kind of a semi-divine view of royalty, and we can scoff at it now until we think about how we would act if we met Taylor Swift or Paul McCartney or whoever. And we probably would be gibbering weirdos.
You're just too young to remember Grace Kelly as Princess Grace, and
I remember her death.
Yeah, but the vibe
first USA Today, by the way, I think first edition of USA Today
was
banner headline: Grace Kelly dies in automobile crash.
Really?
I did not own the first USA Today, but I'm sure I admired the little infographic in the lower left.
But there was a time in the 70s and 80s when Princess Stephanie and all that stuff was in the news. It was what constituted like People magazine level.
Yeah, and Charles and Di Mania, of course.
Right.
That I remember all the olds having a coffee table book of.
But it felt then that there was a kind of circuit in Europe, like a circuit of cocktail parties you would never be invited to, where the people were titled, and so a different kind of celebrity. Like Mick Jagger might get invited, but there were a lot of pop stars that couldn't have gone to these parties. But there were these minor
sorry, Susie Quattro. Sorry, Juice Newton.
Sorry, Juice Newton. Can't get in. But like this super minor little baronet from someplace in Germany that doesn't exist anymore is invited because they're members of a family.
I guess if you're a particular fan of if you're a screaming fan of some particular celebrity, you might be closer to the actual medieval belief that these are divinely appointed personages.
Who would that be for you?
Kanye?
Steve Malcolmus?
Yeah, exactly. It's Steve. It's Kim Deal.
Yeah.
I believe that God created Kim and Kelly Deal. They're twins. They hatched from eggs.
I know they are.
They hatched from robin's eggs.
Kelly Deal makes scarves. I've talked about that on the show before.
Oh yeah. I had forgotten Kelly Deal making scarves.
Yeah.
Is that something the gods would do? I guess Athena was a weaver.
I've emailed back and forth with her about scarves, thinking, that I was like the target market for a Kelly Deal scarf.
Oh, I thought you were going to maybe learn to knit or crochet, the better to hang.
No, I just haven't found the one I want yet.
The idea that, we associate this divine right of kings that we all have to learn about in AP history with Christian medieval Europe. But, the tradition goes back to as far back as there's been civilization, basically. From the evidence we have of ancient Mesopotamia, our evidence is the earliest people who could be called kings were really just the priests of Astarte or whoever the fertility goddess was, who had been given so much clout and so many, so much beer and grain by the adoring population that they essentially, one of them essentially became royalty.
They built a temple of Syrinx, and one of them sat atop it.
Think how depressing the temples must have been back then. Just some low clay walls. We like to imagine Arthurian Camelots, but that stuff didn't get good until it's just like Mad King Ludwig building retro ones when the castles get good.
If I had a mud wall around my place, I would be satisfied. I'd be pretty psyched, actually.
It's not too late. A lot of your problems would be solved if you just had a mud wall around your house.
If I had like an 8-foot mud wall.
A low mud wall and a small shrine to Ishtar.
Yeah, right.
That's all you need.
And a 50 caliber machine gun.
They didn't have that in ancient Mesopotamia. The Roman emperors were offered, the Roman Empire was kind of kept together with the idea that we must be dutiful sacrificers to the gods. And as a result, once Roman leaders became emperors, they were offered cultus, kind of a godlike or demigod-like status. But it really ramps up in the Christian era because, once again, of the Bible.
Oh, I know. Here it comes again.
Now, I know you love the Bible.
I do. So the Roman emperors were demigods, but I mean, how not elevated up into any kind of pantheon, or were they?
Yeah, I mean, are you saying after
they die, could you continue
would you offer to Caesar, for example?
Continue to appeal to them, or would that transfer to the next?
I actually know from reading up on the entry I'm going to put in the vault in 2 weeks that when Caesar died, Augustus built a temple to him and had like a massive citywide games to celebrate the fact that you could now go pray to Julius Caesar.
When I die, will you build a temple to me?
Yeah, but it'll be like the low mud kind.
Yeah.
And the machine guns will be fake.
I'll take it.
The machine guns will be like my son's old Nerf pistols that he doesn't want anymore, Nerf rifles. So in the Bible, kings are afforded a certain status. I mean, I think these medieval European kings probably ignored the idea that God keeps telling Israel, look, you don't want a king. You've got me, Yahweh, judges and prophets, don't say my vowels. You don't need a king. But eventually God gives in. And so Samuel, the prophet, or subsequent prophets ordain, give their actual divine imprimatur to King Saul and King David and so on. So you have these biblical examples of kings whom the God of Israel has said, you now run my people.
And how much of their decision-making is independent of God? I mean, how many
Well, they're always screwing up.
Right. So, I mean, do they have like regular conferences? Do they check in, or they're just, God gave them the little tin star, and then they're out running the town, and then
they've got to do important sacrifices, but the Bible, the Hebrew Bible's full of stories of them just screwing it up.
Yeah.
David's supposed to save this bread for the sacrifice, and he just eats it. Like he's a one marshmallow king.
You had one job.
David, you had one job. And it was like not to send that guy into war so you could have sex with his wife.
Right.
Because you were
one job.
Because you were spying on her bathing. Saul goes crazy and throws javelins at people. I mean,
see, you and I have kept both those covenants. We have sent no one into war, slept not with their wives, and have hurled no javelins.
But is it the lack of opportunity? I mean, neither of us are in a position where we could send someone off to Iraq or Afghanistan because they have a pretty young military bride.
Right. You're saying we'll never be tested until.
Yeah, I'm saying given the chance, you would do that and I would not.
Well, yeah, actually.
So these medieval kings kind of ignored the part of the story where the kings are like a screw up, plan B and a huge screw ups. And they just say, hey, you know what God wanted his people to have? A king.
Are you saying that people perverted the intention of the Bible?
It's the first and last time it ever happened.
Okay.
But you can see why it's to their advantage. I mean, the Christian era promotes this biblical ethos of great humility before God. You don't ask questions. You just do what God says. And that's good news for a king of Wessex or France or something, if he can say, hey, I'm sorry to say this, but Jesus isn't around. I'm going to be minding the shop while he's gone. And as a result, I need you to show all the unquestioning obedience and humility you would show the God of the universe to me. Some hemophiliac Habsburg with a weird jaw.
But, the Bible is, even within itself, always retconning itself. Like every next chapter of the Bible is saying, well, what the last chapter really meant now is here's what that chapter, it's like constantly changing even within itself. So
I guess you've got Jesus saying, hey, render unto Caesar's the things that are Caesar's and render unto God's the things that are God's. And that's a distinction that gets kind of blurred.
Right.
What
are those?
In the medieval and early modern era here.
Give me all the God things and then I'll get them to God. It's a trickle down thing.
I'll decide which things
are trickle up thing.
We have even in the, and this is complicated for many years in that Europe is also kind of being run by a pope who is also, he is always eager to point out God's chosen representative and the successor of Christ in a certain way and so forth. But, a king, it's a long way. It takes a long time for a raven to get to Rome back then.
Mm-hmm.
So in various
it's even
parts
longer
of
to
Europe,
Tipperary.
For a raven? It's
depending on when they left, yeah.
Yeah, and if they take this, I mean, literally a raven is going to go as the crow flies.
Right.
Or is he not? Is he going to go as the raven flies?
Are we talking about a European raven or?
But even back then, when the Pope was like, had a pretty substantial clout,
With a K.
Kings and his clout score was amazing. 5-star in the bio. The kings of various principalities and duchies and so forth all over Europe were eager to say, we also in our realm have a certain God-given responsibility. Richard the Lionheart's battle cry was "God and my right," which is a little bit hard to parse. To this day, no one really knows if he meant my right hand,
My right to your pretty wife.
Exactly. God gives me my right, or, is he saying God's and my rights are the same, but it doesn't matter. It's so, it now appears in the United Kingdom coat of arms.
Right.
It's been stuck into history. And, I think the implication there is that, he's in battle saying, God and my right, if God wants me to win, I'm going to win, I'll win. I'll succeed by his divine favor, and there's really no difference between my will and his. His motivations are pretty plain. There's a story of, on the way home from the Crusades, King Richard was kidnapped. It's the whole reason we get Robin Hood, is that, he's kidnapped by he's passed around for ransoms. The Holy Roman Empire is not crazy that he annexed Cyprus on his way home, which, it's pretty ambitious.
Yeah.
Crusade's over. He's headed home. You know what? Just going to annex Cyprus.
Cyprus is easy to annex, but hard to hold.
Have you tried to annex Cyprus?
No, but it's on my to-do list.
This is my risk game strategy. I always start by, you got to take Australia and you got to annex Cyprus. And so when he's facing trial to the Holy Roman Emperor for, he's facing some diet of angry electors, he actually says, "Hey, I am born in a rank which recognizes no superior but God, to whom alone I am responsible for my actions."
Mm-hmm.
He's saying, how dare you,
try me,
Germanic people, try to try me?
Yeah, in your temporal court.
All I have to do is please God. And unless you're God, you have no jurisdiction here.
That's usually what someone says just as they light the pyre under their feet, right?
Well, we know from Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, that he gets back.
Right.
He's protected by his royal station. He's not going to get Joan of Arc. But this idea of Richard's that the king is responsible to no one but God really explodes after the Protestant Reformation in the Protestant parts of Europe, because now there's a big power vacuum.
Right. There's no interlocutor, no pope.
Intermediary?
No.
He could be your interlocutor too if you're on his podcast.
I guess that's right.
Hey.
What's up? What's up, Pally?
What's up, Your Holiness?
But so you're saying that the Protestant kings then there were all those layers of middle management that were gone, and they really, this divine right of kings,
and suddenly they're very eager to say, hey, much as you used to think of the Pope as the only intermediary between you and God, we don't have him anymore. But good news, there's me, Henry VIII, or whoever. And the funny thing is, now there's an ironic pressure for these new European leaders to take on all that kind of papal ritual and elaborate goings on. But the fact is, many of them are austere Protestants.
Exactly. I cannot picture the pape-like rituals that would be adopted by somebody that was it.
Some Scottish steward.
Yeah, right. Where their
with nothing
churches
under his kilt
had no ornamentation, and Jesus was just an aluminum suggestion.
Does James I have a fine ermine kilt he can put on? It's hard to imagine, right?
It is. I always think of the divine right of kings as a thing on the Catholic side of the Habsburgs, but
no, it actually became much more strongly asserted after the Reformation. And it led to this kind of tension between, hey, does the king do all this magical stuff, or is that like kind of popish and weird and we need to strip that out? To what degree do the people need it? To what degree can we talk his majesty into it? How much do we have to pay off the archbishop to allow it?
Are we talking about Swedish kings here? Don't they just march around and salt the earth? Isn't that their scheme?
Our story today primarily takes place in England and France. I don't know if the royal touch ever extended into the Scandinavian monarchies. That's an interesting question.
Must have done.
You'd think back up there they would just, if somebody gets sick, they just throw you into a snowdrift.
Yeah.
And if you're still alive in May.
No, they open up an elk and throw you in that and then throw the elk into a snowdrift.
I thought these things smelled bad on the outside. So this tension between, which of these rites do these new divine kings do leads to a revival of this tradition that actually goes back centuries prior of royal touch. But it's not clear how far back it goes. And a lot of this is because of that English-French rivalry that defines so much of our history of this era. The English will say, hey, Edward the Confessor was totally doing this like before the Norman conquest. And the French will say, no, you English pig dog, he was not. They would say, he got this from Clovis the First or, Robert the First or, some Philip the First, some French king. It's just later guys, William the First or your Henry the First are picking this up from our guys. And the English would say, no, it wasn't. You know very well Louis the Ninth started this and he got it from our side. He saw the Normans doing it. And so there's the history, the early origins of this tradition are hard to pick out because the English and French are fighting over. And the implication is a real geopolitical one. Which of these kings is exercising true divine right? That has a lot of implications for who should control the French throne, who should
pass down to.
Yeah, because at this point, England and France are fighting over a lot of the same territory. So the question of who is the king of Brittany, for example, is in question and is changing every few decades.
Is that it? Are those source materials still in dispute now among historians?
Yes, it is not clear where the tradition of the royal touch began because so much of what we have from it, know about it, comes from maybe these post-Reformation traditions of, well, it was Edward the Confessor. What's generally believed is that there is a common infection, less common today, in the Middle Ages called scrofula.
I hardly ever hear about it.
Yeah, you and I are not scrofulous. That's because today we call it tuberculous cervical lymphadenitis.
Oh,
so
right.
Of course, we all know about.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot.
Talk about TCL a lot. We've done a few omnibuses about it.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, it's what if tuberculosis, the is it bacterium?
Lung?
Yeah, what if instead of getting your lung, instead it got in the lymph nodes of your neck?
Oh, yuck.
And the answer is yuck. That is the diagnosis.
It's a big boil, right?
You get lesions, you get weeping and swelling, and it goes up into the face. I think it can even affect the eyesight if it gets up high enough. So it's gross, which makes it kind of like leprosy.
Sure.
And as we know, again, from the Bible, stepping in thousands of years later to change our point of view, there is a history of God's anointed being able to do magical things with his touch.
Right.
He's like
lays on the hands.
Close-up magic, yeah. In the Hebrew Bible, you've got Moses putting his hands on Joshua and then on other Israelite elders to ordain them to positions. And then in the New Testament, of course, it becomes expressly about healing. Yeah. Christ often touches people. He'll do very physical things. He'll wipe mud in their eyes. He'll touch their skin. Somebody will touch him and he'll be like, ooh, I just done healed somebody, like.
By them touching him.
Yeah. A famous story is Christ walking through a crowd and suddenly he's like, hey, I just felt the virtue go out of me. Who touched my robe? And it's some lady. And she's like, I mean, it can't be all of the virtue,
sure,
I hope.
He drained a little virtue.
But yeah, he can tell like he's lost some hit points.
Wait a minute. There used to be 4 mini bar bottles of whiskey, and now there are only 3.
But you'd think that being Christ, he has infinite. This goes back to the Council of Nicaea. You'd think he had infinite virtue, and it would be a Hilbert Hotel scenario where he doesn't care if one room of his infinite Hilbert Hotel of virtue checks out.
But it's more like the battery in your
right.
electric car.
Exactly. He's
goes
like,
down
ooh.
and then back up.
I mean, that implies that he has to go recharge at night through prayer.
Touching me, touching you.
Is this why you wanted to ask about Scandinavian kings? So you could sing ABBA later? And then after Jesus ascends to heaven, the apostles continue his work, and they often lay their hands on each other to administer the Holy Spirit. So both spiritual and healing gifts are conveyed by touching. And if the king is truly God's servant and Christ's representative in our little kingdom, wherever we are, Wessex or whatever,
He must have that power too.
then you'd think he would have that power too. Scrofula was very common back then because I think it was often spread via unpasteurized milk, or as they called it, milk.
Right.
And it's a big reason why you and I are not scrofulous right now.
Because
We are scrupulous about pasteurizing our milk.
I see. I thought you were going to say because as Northern Europeans, we had developed
We don't drink.
through our constant milk consumption an immunity.
I thought it's because we're adult men and don't drink big frosty glasses of milk anymore.
Don't you though?
With a cookie, I do.
Yeah.
Mindy stopped buying. I only drink 1%.
Oh,
I used to be a 2%
that's
guy.
virtuous.
Yeah, I used to be a 2% guy, and then I was like, you know what? I feel like I'm not doing quite enough for God.
Sure, bump it down.
If I deny myself a little bit of milk fat, I will be rewarded in the kingdom to come.
But did it take the joy away?
No, I actually found that as long as it's not skim, this stuff's fine.
Yeah, skim is kind of translucent.
Skim's
in
a
gross
problem.
way.
But to me, 1% and 2% were, and I didn't like whole milk either. In Korea, when I was a kid, all we could really get on the Korean market was whole milk. And the first time my mom served it, I was like, "What?" You know, it kind of coats your mouth with a little molecule of butter fat.
You can already
what is this?
feel the phlegm welling up in the back of your neck,
She was wishing us many goods and cheese.
throat. I guess you don't say neck.
It could be on the back of your neck if you have scrofula.
I guess so.
But like Mindy just stopped buying 1% milk because nobody was drinking it, but the kids, and they preferred skim. So
They prefer skim.
it's weird to me too.
Do they put it on their cereal? Or do they drink glasses of milk?
Both
Wow.
cereal and it's just that bluish water, that blue Star Wars milk that is skim milk. But good for them. Good for these. Good for those tender millennial snowflakes. At some point, a superstition began that the only reliable cure for scrofula was to have the king touch you.
Whoa!
And it's hard to imagine how this began.
I mean,
This was so deeply ingrained that scrofula was often called mal du roi, the king's illness, which is a bummer. It implies that he causes it. We don't call cancer chemotherapy's illness.
It's kind of a tricky way to say there is no cure for it, because how many of these unlucky people are ever going to get the king to touch them?
Well, that's the thing. You need to create a massive infrastructure to get scrofulous subjects in front of His Majesty. And in fact, that is what happens in medieval Europe.
In front of the king. So the king can't transfer the king's touch to like a stick.
Well, as we'll see, he can transfer it to some kind of amulet or talisman, but you need His Majesty's fingers.
Got it.
Now, this does not often accord with His Majesty's desire to not be touching a lot of gross, sick lesions.
Right.
So
His Majesty's fingers is actually a kind of mattress.
His Majesty's fingers? I think that's one of those condoms you buy in a gas station. They've got the Portuguese tickler.
They're always out of
His Majesty's fingers.
That's the one that's never there.
So the king obviously is like, do I really have to do this?
Yeah.
But it's an important part of his imprimatur as king. Historically, modern day historians have noticed that the rise of the royal touch always corresponds with a new dynasty. When Henry VII takes the throne, suddenly he's like, ooh, you know what we haven't done in a while? The royal touch. Because it's a way of showing everybody, from the church to the nobles to the common man alike, I've got to be the real king. I'm touching scrofulous people up here on Easter and Michaelmas.
Right. I killed my uncle and all four of his sons.
But I've got to be the legitimate king because this guy's scrofula went away. Now, so there was this whole system whereby if you had the symptoms of scrofula, you would have to go to your local church warden who would take a look and, he would say, that does appear to be scrofula. And what's more, I've been keeping these records for generations, and you, dumb Kevin, have not been to see His Majesty. Oh. So you are eligible. So that list of all the people in his parish got sent on to Whitehall or London, wherever the king lived. And on a certain day, and it ended up, I think at first it was a much more informal tradition. The tradition actually is that whoever started it, Edward the Confessor or whatever, he would touch his ailing subjects, and then the crown would pay for their upkeep and care. Oh. And so when the process got streamlined and simplified for greater throughput, the process became, he'll touch you and then you'll get a coin.
A coin.
You get a little, the idea is that it continues this tradition of the crown helping to pay for your healing.
But it's more of a commemorative coin.
It's both. as we'll see.
Okay.
It's a real coin of the realm. So you get the king doesn't want to do this every day, so eventually it gets codified to basically Easter and Michaelmas.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you and I, obviously, we celebrate Easter with our baskets and our bunnies.
Every week.
Oh, you celebrate Easter every week?
Yes, every week.
Which day
is
of the
a
week?
new Easter.
Which day of the week do you celebrate Easter?
Well, it's on a lunar calendar, so
and
it changes.
It's like a 9-day week for you.
Yeah.
We don't celebrate Michaelmas much in this country. I had to Google when Michaelmas is.
When is it?
Late September. It seems to be chosen. I mean, it's the day of Saint Michael, the archangel, which, good for him.
Yeah.
It's
a whole day.
do we really need a saint? Do we really need to beatify Michael the archangel? He's already an angel. He's
an archangel.
He's a glorious, inhuman presence of light. Do we really need to codify his miracles and say, and he's a saint?
I mean, they have to fill up that whole that row of statues there at St. Peter's Square.
Is it like at T-Mobile Park where there's not enough championship banners for the Mariners?
Yeah. They had to fill a gap.
Yeah. Why do you make Michael, Gabriel, and Raphael saints? I guess you just have to kiss up to those guys, right?
It's weird.
Yeah,
it's weird considering that there are some lower saints that didn't really do that much.
All the excesses and a logic of religion. And this is the first time you and I have ever agreed. They've gone too far.
Do you feel?
You should not be canonizing archangels.
I mean, is saint like 3-star general where they all are basically the same rank except everybody knows like this one's kind of a sap and that one is really in charge? Or are there different levels of saint?
Yeah, you can be beatified, but it's usually a step in being canonized. So I think maybe it's analogous to the general thing where you could get a promotion.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think in the end, everybody has the same rank. And then just the people know, well, I care about St. Jude and I don't care about St. Ethelred.
Right. And here comes
scrofulous
Michael, look busy.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, the reason why Michael's Saint Day became such a big feast day is, first of all, because they're angels, so let's have a feast for them.
Right.
But also just because it happened to fall right around the time of the, if Christmas is your solstice festival and Easter is your spring equinox. Yeah, this is 6 months after. So it's like your fiscal year, basically. It's helpful for the king to have every 6 months a holy day so he can do tax stuff or whatever. And in this case, he can invite thousands of gross oozing peasants to Whitehall and do the laying on of hands.
My daughter's birthday is in March and mine is in September. And, for most of my life, my birthday was what happened in September because there's not much else that happens in September.
Nope.
But now my birthday has basically been converted into my daughter's half birthday.
Wait, she gets a half birthday?
Well, no, she doesn't, but she thinks she
does.
And so right around my birthday, when I'm like, hey, here it comes, she's like, my half birthday's coming up.
My family is also a May-November romance, but we don't celebrate any of the November people's half birthday. So I get my special Gemini day all to myself. Right. But it is always around Memorial Day.
We say Gemini. You
do not say Gemini. We the astronauts. My birthday is always around Memorial Day, and everybody else's is around Thanksgiving, so it's a nightmare. Not Memorial Day so much. Who cares about Memorial Day? Anyway, so every Easter and Michaelmas, the king would invite all these people who'd been approved by their church wardens. They'd have to come in and they'd have to be examined by like a royal physician and a couple surgeons to see if it really was scrofula. Like I like how there's a scientific. This has to be peer reviewed. Obviously, we only want His Majesty touching the truly scrofulous.
Well, but at the time, there were probably 5 or 6 different ways you could have a pussy neck. And so they had to say, no, this is something else.
Did a rake fall on you?
Yeah.
Why, yes, it did. On what part of you? My neck. All right, next.
And that's just a pimple, a really bad whitehead. Sorry, trigger alert.
So all these kings of England and France, from possibly Edward the Confessor or Clovis, whoever on down, would just go through a line. Somebody would come up. There'd be a big mass for all of them. The archbishop or whoever would get up and read from John chapter 1, which, as we recently covered in the Council of Nicaea, is all about how God sent the word to earth in human form. So I guess maybe it's a winky implication that, well, that was Jesus, but good news. Now it's Henry VII.
Huh?
It's
not just a tripartite. It's got these other
There's
hitchhikers
Father, Son,
in
Holy
it.
Ghost, and Henry VII, I guess. And then they would go on to read the end of the book of Mark, which is the Great Commission to the apostles, where they are told, "Hey, just go throughout all the world, spreading my gospel." And but it's key. The key thing there is it says, and you'll first of all you'll have miraculous powers.
Mm-hmm.
So it explains how the king can do this stuff. But it also says, you can be bitten by snakes, and they won't kill you. You can lay your hands on lepers, and they'll be cured. So it's kind of outlining the healing power and the imperviousness to toxin and disease that God's servants will have.
Right, but it is putting some limits on it too. I mean, you can be bitten by a snake and not die, but but not a lion.
Well, maybe it does. Maybe it's just implying. You think the implication is, call me for the small stuff.
Yeah, or like.
I think it's just listing a variety to demonstrate the vast array of things from which God protects us.
But not they
true.
never make a claim about syphilis,
It's
right?
true. He never says and if your head is cut off, it will regrow.
Right.
That's a fair point, I guess.
Apparently, there are 17 species of viper in Europe.
But are any of them poisonous?
Well, yeah.
I mean, I guess you have to remember that this would have included the Middle East and
there
North
are
Africa
lots of viperous snakes.
The Book of Acts actually includes stories bearing out this prophecy where snake bites, in fact, I think, are ineffective against, who knows? Let's say Peter.
This is what people don't know about where we live here in the Northwest. No poisonous snakes.
That's true. We do have black widows. We do have a few poisonous spiders, but really nobody's died in 50 years because
most
it's so
of those,
hard.
they live over in Wenatchee.
But there are people in Wenatchee who reach into their mailbox and can get black widowed or something. But the fact is, it just swells up, and then a doctor gives you a shot, and you're fine.
And whether or not the residents of Wenatchee are people, technically,
and I guess, do they believe in doctors?
There you go.
Hard to say. Maybe they just have spider doctors.
Maybe they.
I'm not getting that vaccine, but I need my spider shot.
They do die, and they get buried in the desert.
That's as per local law.
Yeah.
There are no cemeteries east of the Cascades. So then the people file in front of the king. He will touch them.
Gross.
Yeah, he didn't really want to. Originally, it was like any ailment. The king would ask you, what do you have? I have a fever, my lord. And he'd be like, bunk. But eventually it was just scrofula. And he would one of the reasons why the talisman develops, because he didn't want to touch you with his fingers, because gross. The king's like you and me. He doesn't want pus on his fingers
at all.
So he would touch you with this coin, or kind of wave it in the sign of the cross over you, but then you'd get to keep the coin. And it was an actual, good quality gold coin. I think they minted new coins showing St. Michael the Archangel fighting Satan. So the coin was informally called the angel, but it would have a hole punched in it and a ribbon threaded through it.
Oh.
But you'd still have, 5 grams of gold. So that was valuable. And it was part of the reason for the elaborate filtering technique.
Make sure there are no grifters.
Yeah. And I'm sure a lot of the people with scrofula were like, this is not going to work, but I would like 5 grams of gold, please, Your Majesty. But that's why they had to make sure it was no repeat customers.
Right.
It's like one of those online voting things. They don't want anybody doing it a million times. So yeah, by the time
you mean voting?
Yeah, or like actual voting. And so this was how it worked in Tudor time, but under the Stuarts, this is where this ritual really took off. James I and Charles I were both reluctant because they wanted to simplify everything about Catholicism in the Church of England. They wanted a more austere Church of England with less ritual. But they were persuaded that this is what it took to show, they were a new dynasty as well. They were the Stuarts. They had to show that they were legitimate heirs to the English throne. So they bit the bullet, as it were. They insisted that, I'm not going to touch them so much. I'm just going to use the coin. It's speculated that one of the reasons why this was often performed at Easter and Michaelmas is because the cold weather meant that scrofula was less likely. It was thought to be less virulent.
Is it?
And less likely to spread to His Majesty's. I mean, I
or
guess
just people wearing mufflers, and so you can't get to their necks.
I mean, it's bacterial. You'd think that winter would be cold season when everybody's getting tuberculosis.
Right.
That's probably in your lungs, though. I don't know. I mean, the science of this is all very iffy. I mean, today...
Wait a minute. The science of laying on hands is iffy?
Well, the science of why people assumed that the king could cure scrofula. I guess it's assumed that it's because it was a self-limiting disease. In other words, it would often just go into remission.
Right.
So all it took would be a few high-profile cases where the king did touch somebody, and by next week the scrofula was gone, and then the story spreads.
Yeah.
And then it becomes a thing where it's self-perpetuating. The people who did get cured are going to trumpet it. The people who didn't won't, because, first of all, there might be reprisals from those in power of the church and the state if they go around saying, hey, James I touched me and it didn't do jack.
Was there not some element of, well, it didn't work because you're a sinner?
And there's that as well. Like, well, the king can't have been at fault. I'm the only other person in that interaction. So yeah, I'm assuming there's some of that as well. And of course, we've talked about the placebo effect. I don't know. That probably does not work on neck lesions, but it might be like, you know what? Maybe I'm still oozing and pussy, but I feel so much better.
Yeah.
Since His Majesty touched me.
What is the cure for it? Since it's bacterial, it would just be penicillin now, but could you just wash your neck rigorously?
I'm not sure at the time what you could have done. Today...
Stop rubbing your neck on the tuberculosis post?
Today, I mean, for some tuberculosis bacteria, a surgical excision works really well, but then it can recur. So yeah, it's normally just antibiotics. There's some cocktail of like 6 things I can't pronounce.
Yikes.
Streptomycin. I recognize the last one.
There it is. That's a one.
The other 4 I can't say. But the talisman, the royal touch piece, it was called, you were supposed to keep with you, and it wasn't just a souvenir, but it was actually supposed to protect you. Dr. Johnson, Samuel Johnson, the writer and thinker, had a bad case of scrofula as a kid and lost eyesight in one eye because of it. So at the age of 2, he was brought before Queen Anne, who gave him the royal touch, and he kept his little amulet around his neck for the rest of his life. I mean, possibly as just kind of a souvenir.
Right.
The way you would grab a French fry if you saw Ted Danson eating some fries and one fell on the floor.
I survived scrofula, and all I have to show for it is this gold coin.
But, with the exception of this, there was as you can imagine, there was an Oliver Cromwell type interregnum in The Divine Right of Kings and Royal Touching. But before and after, the Stuarts just could not stop touching. I think it was Charles I that touched 8,500 people in 1 year.
Oh, that's a lot of touching.
Across the Channel in France, Louis XIV touched 1,600 people one Easter. Charles II had such a massive royal touch ceremony that it led to a stampede and people were actually trampled to death.
Whoa.
And Shakespeare's Macbeth, a work written to help legitimize the new Scottish kings of England, actually has Malcolm speak about this in Act 4 of Macbeth. Shakespeare has Malcolm say about scrofula, "'Tis called the evil, a most miraculous work in this good king, which often, since my here remain in England, I have seen him do. How he solicits heaven himself best knows, but strangely visited people, all swollen and ulcerous, pitiful to the eye, the mere despair of surgery, barbers have been trying to cut it out and it doesn't work, he cures, hanging a golden stamp about their necks, put on with holy prayers. And 'tis spoken to the succeeding royalty, he leaves the healing benediction. With this strange virtue he hath a heavenly gift of prophecy, and a sundry blessings hang about his throne that speak him full of grace." So basically we can tell the king is full of grace and prophecy.
Among other things.
Because he's out here touching the scrofulas just like Christ used to do.
There's 3,600 seconds in an hour. You could...
They're not coming up in an assembly line like ba-ba-ba-ba-da-ba-da-ba, but you can't do one a second.
No, but 1,600 seems like a lot of people to touch in a day, but let's say you give everybody 5 seconds. It's still possible.
5 seconds, you can do 12 in a minute. So yeah, it would only take a matter of hours.
Yeah,
right?
right.
In 3 hours, you can do 1,600 people. And the king was not working an 8-hour day.
No.
This is the longest mass he has to do and he is hating it.
Yeah.
He's like,
hustle it up there. He's probably got 3 or 4 different, handlers working the line.
It's like Trump refusing to do the Easter egg roll or something like, what? This takes 45 minutes? I'm not doing this.
It's like King Charles now refusing to do all the things that his mom did. He's not opening any more supermarkets, I don't think.
Well, he's quite old. Just because his 91-year-old mom could do it doesn't mean 71-year-old Charles should have to. The tradition, like so many things, died with the Stuarts. The Hanovers took over, and they were like, 9.
Not a German vibe.
This is too popish. And I really think that was the objection, that like we're getting rid of this kind of superstitious nonsense. We are austere Lutherans, and this Michaelmas stuff is BS.
Yeah.
At Michaelmas, we shall have a candlelit tree and nothing else. I don't know what they did for Michaelmas. But the Stuart
less and less.
But the Stuart pretenders, whom, exactly, to the present day, the Stuart pretenders, whom, as we were just talking about, spent the next few hundred years
agitating,
chilling around Europe, hoping that their day would come. Just hanging out in Bruges.
Yep.
We actually, you know what? We stayed at a hotel in Bruges last summer that still has a plaque on the outside because some deposed, I don't know, maybe Charles I during the interregnum, or maybe no, it couldn't have been.
Stayed there? Like George Washington slept here?
Yeah, I think it was Charles I after the English Civil War, lived in that hotel for a few months.
Like Bukowski.
But I don't think they should brag about that. I mean, at least, Charles I is a loser. It's Confederate statues. Bukowski's a loser.
But even,
sorry, men's rights guys.
Even a loser Stuart is still a Stuart.
He's still a Stuart.
Yeah.
And so the Stuart pretenders in exile said, hey, I'm actually the king, not these Hanover cousins. And so they proved it by touching all the scrofulas that were brought before them.
In Bruges.
Or wherever. Or Ireland, wherever they were. Until as late as 1807, there were still, when the last Stuart claimant to the throne died, he was still touching dumb Kevin's lesions every Michaelmas.
Really?
Yeah.
And there continued to be scrofulous.
They're still scrofula.
But
scrofulous being the adjective.
But
like leprous.
But it still exists to this day. Who's laying hands on those people? No one? The doctors with the penicillin.
with the antibiotic prescriptions.
But from 1807 until antibiotics.
Yeah, there's another interregnum.
Yeah.
100 years of maybe. The thing is, scrofula did not return because I don't want to spoil anything. The King's Touch was probably not actually curing the mal du roi at all.
I see.
It was just occasionally corresponding with remissions.
Thank you for clarifying that.
I mean, a lot of our listeners are probably thinking, how do I find a Stuart descendant to get him to touch my swollen nodes?
And the other listeners...
If you had a Stuart descendant right here, would you ask him to touch your swollen nodes?
Touch my swollen nodes, you Stuart descendant. I would. I mean, if among other things, I would ask.
The amulets, many of them still survive. They became charms for those who held them, and then later family heirlooms, and finally museum pieces. You can see Dr. Johnson's, I think at the British Museum in London. I tried to find some going at auction. What would one of these golden angel coins that had been handled by James Stewart himself, what would that go for at auction today?
They all got melted down in 1980 during the Hunt brothers.
That's probably true. Yeah. I did find one selling for only $1,600.
What?
That was the only one I could find.
That seems like a reasonable price.
It seems like, that's historic 300-year-old gold. Maybe the purity's not good. I don't know, but there can't be that many of them, right?
Yeah, I guess it depends. If you are living in a spacious Upper West Side apartment and you've got money to spend on something to put on the walls, I guess on the Upper West Side, there are just a bunch of tapestries on the walls. It's Upper East Side where you might have a scrofulous gold coin in a frame.
Well, the coin's not going to be scrofulous. I'm sure after all these years. You think the tuberculosis bacterium is just hanging out there waiting to be fingered by a new owner?
I mean, the coin was meant to hang around the neck, right? So the scrofula...
But it doesn't seep in.
Does it not? Do you know so much about metallurgy that there's not room for scrofula in between the gold molecules?
It's true. If I was an alchemist, I would probably say that it had. If I was a homeopathy believer, I would say that the gold remembers all the scrofula that it was near.
Tiny, tiny little scrofula molecules still clinging to it.
Maybe the king is like a homeopathic remedy, Maybe the idea is
if that were the case, the Germans would have really bought into it. And that concludes the Royal Touch, entry 1087.MT1902. 1902. Certificate number 22347 in the omnibus. Futurelings, in the unlikely event that social media still exists in your era, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram are archived at Omnibus Project.
Is that how you spell at when it's a punctuation mark? We need to have a way of signifying the word at versus the shift to.
At.
At.
I say at all the time on this show.
For Star Wars?
Yeah. And also because I say at Omnibus Project. Our handles were at Ken Jennings and at John Roderick. Our address, email address, that is the omnibusproject@gmail.com. You can hang out with other Futurelings on Discord and Discourse and Discombobulation, Disambulation, and also Facebook. You can support the show, and please do at patreon.com/omnibusproject. We've now transitioned to doing the show once a week, and it's a lively, banter-filled show now. Unlike the old shows, which were
unlike the previous death marches,
just like so boring.
I think you made the point to me that the well, I guess I should say this later, but the addenda shows are now more valuable, given that there's now one of them for every 4 or 5 omnibus entries, whereas before it would have been more like one for every 10 to 11.
That's right. So if you are a longtime listener and you're thinking to yourself, well, I've never subscribed to the Patreon.
I never subscribed when there were 2 shows a week. Why would I subscribe when there are 1?
Because you're missing like basically 20%, 25, no, what would it be? 18%. It's 20%.
I did not follow the beginning of this math.
No, it's all right. You're missing 20% of our shows now by not subscribing to Patreon.
You miss 20% of the shots you don't take.
That's right. Instead of 10% or whatever it was before. I'm bad at math. And if you know what? I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to shame myself that way. I'm good at math.
That's right.
Yeah.
You don't have to be like that Barbie that said math is hard.
No, I'm fine at math. I do math all the time. And it's mostly right.
Speaking of Patreon, we should thank Jack, whose contribution led him to suggest this Royal Touch Piece episode.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you, Jack.
And finally, you can send us actual things in the mail at P.O. Box 55744, Shoreline, Washington, 98155. If you have a large package, address it to 18336 Aurora Avenue North, Suite 105, Apartment 55744.
The suite is the post office. The box is the apartment.
That's Shoreline, Washington, 98155. And I hear you over there opening the mail. What do you got? Anything good?
What day of do you get a lot of Christmas cards? Or are your friends not normally enough to send Christmas cards?
I still get a sizable stack.
We get a ton despite never having done one ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We're takers.
Mm-hmm.
We're leeches in the Christmas card economy. And the day we get the most Christmas cards, I would say, is like December 26th. Like,
yeah.
The day after Christmas is when they all show up.
Do you get a lot that have like long paragraphs describing what everybody did that year?
Yeah, it's called the Christmas letter.
Okay.
Do you call that long paragraphs describing what everybody did that year?
I mean, most of the Christmas cards I get are thinking of you, from us, and 5 pictures of the family.
We get the Christmas.
You get the letter.
And we read the letter. It's, I don't know who any of your kids are, but one of them went to Austin. Congrats.
My cousin Paige really fills us in on what her family is doing.
We got one kind of weirdly honest one this year. It was like, boy, it was really tough. What with all the mental health challenges. I was like, wow. But we also had a friend of ours who did a full 22 ending choose your own adventure book.
How
of their year.
Excruciating.
2 of which actually end in death. 2 of the endings end in death.
For you, the
reader.
Whoa.
And I believe they listened to Omnibus. So I'm going to say that it was the best card we got this year.
Yeah, sure.
It was a picture-perfect replica of a Choose Your Own Adventure book. And I asked my wife, I was like, what is this? Am I now a member of their family in the stories? Or which one? And she said, no, you just hang out with them and have adventures. That's the best Christmas card idea I've ever heard.
I texted you right on or before Christmas Day saying that, we around here, we had decided that we were going to do a Secret Santa Christmas instead of a kind of orgy of presents. And then at the last minute,
The orgy was canceled.
no, I discovered, no one is actually adhering to the Secret Santa.
The orgy's
theme.
back on the menu.
The orgy's on the menu. And I was somewhat at a loss. Like I didn't have any stocking stuffers for everybody. And I came down here and I went through the omnibus mailbag and there were all kinds of cool little gifts. And so I took all these weird little gifts and put them around. You know that we got that bag of healing crystals, and I actually took all the different crystals and separated them out and gave each person a bag of healing crystals that was
personalized to their
that was aligned with the chakra they needed to be massaged.
So thoughtful.
But what the problem is that my daughter comes down to our bunker and plays. And she had gone through the omnibus mailbox. So every time someone opened one of these presents, she was like, "Hey!" until I had to start giving her the eye, like, "Shush, shush."
Had she been told they were hers earlier in the year?
Well, she had definitely adopted some of them. But.
Well, the reason why I mentioned Christmas cards is because even here in the new year, we are still receiving. These could have been sent on time. They've just been sitting in apartment number. What was it?
55744.
55744.
Suite 105.
We got a Jurassic Park themed Christmas card from the Comistra family. Holiday cheer finds a way. We got Sonia and her dog's year in review. It's a Christmas letter in bullet points form. Do you endorse this?
I do.
Ask me for a number and I'll tell you what the bullet point was. Suggest a number from 1 to 5. 1 to 5.
3.
She saw New Kids on the Block in concert twice.
No, she did not.
You must have to travel. There's no way they did 2 nights in one place or did 2 tours.
But, they could do 2 nights in Ohio.
And we got a Lego-themed card from the Donahues. Oh, it looks just like a Lego box.
I like it.
Omnibus gets us through the year.
Merry Brickmas.
Merry late Brickmas to all. And then Mike, Michelle, or possibly Michele, because they say they wish us a Buon Natale.
Michaela
suggested the Batavia entry, and because you like coffee and chocolate, has sent you amazing Italian candies, not sold in the U.S., possibly because they're illegal, called Pocket Coffee. They are chocolates that are actually just filled with liquid coffee.
Oh,
do not take a bite. You are warned in the cover letter.
Okay, don't take a bite.
If you take a bite, coffee will just go everywhere.
That sounds amazing.
Is that what you want?
Well, I mean, I'll have to get in the bath first, but
put it in your mouth and then take a bite. Yeah.
And it's like a boom explosion of coffee in your mouth. I see why you don't want this.
I guess. I mean, I could kind of use one of these right now, honestly. Pocket coffee. I don't know why it's.
I guess if you put them in my pocket either.
No, they would melt.
That'd be gross.
They would melt in your mouth, not in your hands.
Toss them over here.
Are you going to try them on air here?
I'm a little bit tweaky already. You haven't had your Diet Dr. Pepper yet, but wow, it's a small box, but you can feel the coffee.
It's very dense. It's full of the weight of Italian emotion and grief and loss and joy.
Il gusto del ciocciato. Ciocciato.
The taste of something.
Ciocciato.
Ciocciato?
Incontra l'aroma del buon caffè.
Find the taste of good coffee. Find it.
Yes, I'm looking for it. And I found it right here in Pocket Coffee. That's awesome.
Listeners, from our vantage point in your distant past, we have no idea how long our civilization will survive. We hope and pray the catastrophe we fear may never come, but if the worst comes soon, this recording, like all our recordings, may be our final word. But if Providence allows, we hope to be back with you soon for another entry in the Omnibus.